We're set for a high-speed Dutch duel as the world's fastest riders get set to take on the special challenge of fast and flowing Assen, situated near the university city of Groningen, who will be top of the class in the TSO Sprint as Super Saturday builds to a thrilling climax. It's time for MotoGP. So the TT Circuit Assen, some of the most famous 4.54 kilometres on planet Earth. The hallowed tarmac of this magnificent historic circuit. We've already seen some record-busting lap times here in a thrilling qualifying session this morning as world champion Pecco Bagnaia fired a 1:30.540. He leads the field away in the 13-lap TSO Sprint coming up shortly. A fan's favourite, a rider's favourite here, 18 corners, 12 right, 6 of them left, a tight and twisty first sector before you go towards classic old Assen through 6 and 7. It's fast through there, got to be careful. Seen a few crashes in that turn 7 so far this weekend. And will there always be late drama going into the Timmer chicane, turn 16, 1 of 3 hard braking zones around this 4.5 kilometre Assen circuit, with that first sector the most demanding for the Michelin rubber. Overtaking hot spots, well, there are plenty of them, aren't there, around this Assen circuit, and this one probably one of the best we've ever seen. 2 years ago into the Timmer chicane, a late Spargo on the inside of Binder and Miller for a fighting fourth. So nearly 4 weeks since our last MotoGP race action, and what a race it was in front of 80,000 stun-drenched Italian fans in the Tuscany mountains of Mugello. It was Pecco Bagnaia who completed his first double win of the season, as Andrea Bastianini, his teammate on the factory Ducati, produced a stunning late charge, picking off Marc Marquez, picking off Jorge Martin at the very last corner. A first factory Ducati 1-2 in over 3 years, as Pecco Bagnaia, with a kiss tribute to Gene Simmons, probably did rock all night, didn't he, on Sunday night in Mugello, as that double win moves him to within 18 points of World Championship leader Jorge Martin, coming into this round 8 of 2024, what's already been a gripping title battle. 35 points covers our top 3 riders, with Marc Marquez looking a menacing 3rd place on the Gresini Racing Ducati, as we get set for this 13-lap TSO Sprint here in the Motul TT Assen. A beautiful day here in northeast Netherlands. Really pleasant conditions, ambient temperature around the mid-20s, track temperature nudging towards 50 degrees. And we have already had some super action on Super Saturday here today in Assen. As we just mentioned, world champion Pecco Bagnaia continuing his love affair with this Assen circuit. He's had 4 podiums here previously in his career, and they've all been taken from the top step. 2016 Moto3, 2018 in Moto2, he went on to win the World Championship. That trend has continued. Race wins here for the 27-year-old Italian in 2022 and 2023 MotoGP, provided a platform for him to go on to capture the Premier Class Championship in both of those years. He was in sparkling, electrifying form in Q2 this morning. It went all the way down to the wire. Bagnaia's record-breaking 1:30.504, which was nearly a second inside the 2023 pole record. Jorge Martin got mighty close. The Spanish rider, of course, factory Aprilia bound in 2025. Martin was only 0.08 of a second behind Bagnaia. Those two were very much the cream of the crop in that Q2 session. Maverick Viñales, the Aprilia Racing rider, winner in 3 Grand Prix classes here previously in Assen, including MotoGP back in 2019. Well, he was 3rd on that front row, but over 0.3 of a second behind Martin. The 2 top riders in the championship, the 2 top riders on the grid as we begin the countdown then for this TSO Sprint, the 8th edition in 2024. In the company of Matt Burt here in the commentary box with Lewis Sutherby sat alongside me, Simon Crayfar enjoying some glorious late June sunshine here in the Netherlands, as Jorge Martin then, who at one time it was almost a given, wasn't it? You could put your mortgage on him finishing on the podium in a TSO sprint. 13 successive TSO sprints, but he hasn't seen a sprint podium, hasn't had a medal around his neck. That's since Le Mans. Fourth he was in Catalonia, and then the big mistake, crashing out of a safe third place in Mugello, what, 4 weeks ago now. It's been a hectic period for Jorge Martin, as we mentioned, moving on to factory Aprilia team next year. The big conundrum, Lewis, the big question coming into this TSO sprint, right on cue, there he is, the world champion. Has been in phenomenal nick all weekend. He has topped every single session so far. He looks an unbeatable force on paper at the moment.
Yeah,
Pecco Bagnaia.
there are no such things as a foregone conclusion in MotoGP, but I did think that the Pecco Bagnaia pole position this morning was pretty close to it. But boy, did Jorge Martin run him close. 0.08 of a second between them in the end. Martin, though, wasn't looking particularly comfortable yesterday. Pecco Bagnaia looking as comfortable as we've seen him all season long. The momentum is firmly with the reigning world champion after his double win in Mugello off the back of that stunning win in that head-to-head with Martin in Barcelona. Can Bagnaia continue his charge towards potentially the World Championship lead when we go into the summer break? He won't take the points lead from Jorge Martin today, but he could potentially take another bite out of that 18-point advantage.
Untouchable he was in Mugello, led every lap of the sprint and the Grand Prix in front of his jubilant partisan home crowd. He's never actually had back-to-back TSO sprint victories, has Pecco Bagnaia, so a challenge facing him coming up. At least Marc Marquez, after if you joined us this morning at the start of FP2, Marc Marquez ventured out on circuit. He was very eager to get on with business on the GP23 Ducati, because he left pit lane this morning not missing one knee slider. He forgot to put both of them on. This time around, though, there's no repeat of that mistake. Marc Marquez paid dearly at the end of that qualifying session this morning. A high-speed get-off for him going through turn 7 as he was aggressive on the inside of Aleix Espargaro. At that stage, Marquez looked like he was going to be secure on the second row, but inflicting some late punishment was none other than Aleix Espargaro, who was not particularly happy with the hard move Marquez put him on at turn 7. Aleix Espargaro, heroic performance, battered and bruised to say the least after his crash at the Timor chicane yesterday. Lower back pain, neck pain, but Aleix Espargaro, a brilliant last lap of 1:31.077 put him 5th, and it did bump Marc Marquez onto the back of or head of row 3 in 7th place.
Yeah, heroic performances, and Aleix Espargaro at Assen kind of go hand in hand, don't they, over the years? He's had pole on a forward, Yamaha here, of course he came from nigh on the back of the field to 4th with that last chicane move that we saw just at the start of the broadcast 2 years ago, and of course he was on the podium here last year too, but he'll be riding through clear pain this afternoon and tomorrow. It's been a good weekend so far for Alex Marquez. Of course, there's been a little bit of drama over the course of the last 24 hours or so with Mark. He had a big save at Ramshoek yesterday, in addition to what we've already told you about that followed the 8 times world champion today. But Alex has been quietly going about his business, was 3rd quickest yesterday, and he out-qualifies his brother and teammate Mark for the 2nd time in 3 races.
Best qualifying in 9 since his Qatar front row at the tail end of the 2023 World Championship. 4th place, he was only 0.02 of a second away from a front row denied by Maverick Vinales, the factory Aprilia rider. 5th front row in the opening 8 Grand Prix for the 29-year-old. His 5th front row start in his career here in Assen. No Grand Prix podium in the last 4 since that memorable win in Kota for Maverick Vinales. One of several big names on the move in 2025. In fact, 5 of our current top 6 in the MotoGP World Championship as it stands right now, coming into this round 8. A couple of races before we head into a 3-week summer break. 5 of the top 6 will be moving manufacturers or teams in 2025. In the present, though, very much living in the moment, is this man, Pecco Bagnaia. He has been untouchable so far this weekend. That lap this morning, the 1:30.540, I'm not even sure he realised he had that in himself. It was a phenomenal performance. His first pole position in 10 Grand Prix. 9 of his previous 22 Grand Prix wins have come from pole position, and if he wins the Grand Prix here tomorrow, he will tie Casey Stoner, Ducati's Australian legend, in the all-time list of Ducati winners. It will be 23 wins for Pecco Bagnaia, which will put him on par with the great Stoner.
Pit lane is open then, 15 minutes to go to the start of this TSO sprint. You just saw a brief glimpse of Pedro Acosta there, who goes from 10th on the grid. KTMs haven't necessarily looked a match for the Ducatis nor the Aprilias so far this weekend. First KTM on the grid actually is Brad Binder in 9th, ahead of Acosta in 10th, who made his way through Q1 and, having achieved that, then crashed at the very end of qualifying 1. Was fortunately able to go back out in qualifying 2 on that same bike, but the pace so hot. So 1:31.482 from Acosta, that would have been nigh on a lap record 12 months ago. As it is this year, it's only good enough for a place on the 4th row of the grid.
Well, how good was Bagnaia's lap this morning? It was 0.8 of a second quicker than his no all-time lap record set yesterday, which we thought was a pretty hot pace. A hot pace which has been too hot to handle for his MotoGP rivals so far here this weekend in the Netherlands. There is the first gear, the Struven corner. That caught out Marco Bezzecchi this morning. What a difference a year makes for Bez on pole position here 1 year ago in this very Grand Prix. Well, it's a different story in 2024. His issues go on with the turning, the understeer on that Ducati GP23 from pole in 2023 to 15th on the grid. Bezzecchi also had a big washing machine crash going through turn 7 in practice this morning.
Well, this is a relationship which has produced plenty of success over the years, but they won't be sharing quite so many chats, I suspect, next year. Gino Borsoy and Davide Tardozzi. Of course, it was announced after practice yesterday that Pramac will be hooking up with Yamaha. We'll be seeing much more blue on that predominantly purple and red Pramac machine next year. Of course, Jorge Martin, as we now know, will not be on board it. A long-term agreement between Yamaha and Pramac, which will certainly benefit both parties. Yamaha boosting their efforts now from 2 bikes to 4 factory machines next season, which will be positive news for Fabio Quartararo and Alex Rins, who've already got plenty to smile about, because that Yamaha continues to show signs of progress. Although Quartararo missed out in Q1 earlier today, once again that Yamaha showing signs of very slowly taking steps in the right direction. It's a long-term process, but that process very much underway.
The Bagnaia fans, and there's plenty of them here in Assen with the 63 and #1 flags, well, they have been very happy with their hero's work so far here in the Netherlands. It was Marco Bezzecchi, of course, not only from pole position here last year, he won the Tissot sprint, just giving an indication of the kind of troubles that the 25-year-old Italian is having. No top 10 in the last 3 Grand Prix since his one and only podium in Jerez. He's not qualified higher than 15th in the last 3. He's having all kinds of problems getting a tune out of that Ducati GP23 on Michelin's soft tyre at the moment. Yeah, just making sure the knee sliders are fitted. There's 93, Marc Marquez. That's turn 7 crash at Q2, leaves him 7th place on the grid. Finished with a 1:31.378. Did the 31-year-old Spain, of course, who withdrew here 1 year ago, immediately after the Tissot sprint. A real tough weekend. The Dutch TT here last year, coming straight off the back of that horrible weekend in the Sachsenring, where he had 5 crashes at his beloved German Grand Prix. Benny, we're looking at the rider then on pole. Nobody faster ever in history around this Assen circuit than Pecco Bagnaia. We expect it to be everybody in this short, sharp burst of the Tissot sprint to be going for the Michelin soft rear tyre. But let's get bang up to date time information with Michelin Motorsport manager Piero Taramassa, who joins Simon. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Yes, good afternoon. Piero, temperature is risen for sure, especially compared to this morning. Can you tell us what riders will take what tyres you believe and why?
Yes, temperature is close to 50 degrees, it's 48, so we never had this temperature all weekend. So the tire choice is front is hard for most of the rider, the large majority, maybe few Honda, they will use the medium on the front, but it's hard front for all the rest. And on the rear, everybody is with the soft, just Johan Zarco is thinking to use the medium on the rear. But yeah, mainly choice is hard front, soft rear, and I think the sprint will be very, very fast.
Thank you, Piero.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Thanks to Piero Taramassa. So, as we suspected, most of the field going for the soft rear tyre. The only outlier at the moment, he could well change, of course, would be Johan Zarco, the Frenchman, who's having some troubles at the moment, mastering the LCR Honda. 19th, Zarco finds himself on the grid. It's been another pretty poor weekend so far in the Netherlands for HRC. Zarco 19th, Mir 20th. Luca Marini 21st. And Taka Nakagami, a former Moto2 race winner here in Assen, finds himself down in 23rd place on the grid. A grid which we can now look at here ahead of this 13-lap Tissot sprint.
Yeah, that is the 7th time in 8 that Johan Zarco is the top Honda, but as you can see, we've got to wait a long time to see him. Bagnaia, Martin, Vinales on the front row, Alex Marquez, Aleix Espargaro and Di Gianantonio on the second row. Di Gianantonio had to come through qualifying 1. As you can see, everyone going for the hard front soft rear combination, at least on the front 2 rows of the grid. Anyway, on the 3rd row, we find Marc Marquez, with Frankie Morbidelli going for the medium front tyre in the middle of row 3. Brad Binder 9th from Pedro Acosta, Enea Bastianini and Raul Fernandez, who had a big crash in free practice 2 this morning. So pleased to see Raul Fernandez on the grid. Fabio Quartararo 13th from Jack Miller and Marco Bezzecchi, who has had a tough weekend to put it mildly. Alex Rins 16th ahead of Miguel Oliveira and a prettier wildcard, Lorenzo Savadori. The first Honda is back on row 7. That's Johan Zarco, as mentioned. 7th time out of 8 he's been the top Honda in qualifying. He's got Joan Mir and Luca Marini alongside him. Augusto Fernandez 22nd at a circuit that he's taken Moto2 victory in the past. And Taka Nakagami completes your grid in 23rd.
So there is the helicopter shot of one of MotoGP racing's most iconic and historic venues. Next year, when we come back to Assen, it will be the centenary year. They have been racing in this part of the world for 99 years, since 1925. What about the modern-day superstars of MotoGP then? Now they're going to give us a thriller over this Tissot sprint. Maverick Vinales just taking on some liquids. Now then, so far, so good. Utterly brilliant, as we mentioned this morning, hasn't he been the world champion? Pecco Bagnaia, the massive bookies' favourite coming into this Tissot sprint this afternoon after his sprint success in Mugello as well. Let's get some thoughts from, I'm sure, a very happy and confident Ducati boss, Davide Tardozzi, who joins Simon.
He does, Davide. Have to say, Pecco's looked sublime all this weekend, but you're more experienced than most, and you know how you can't be overconfident going into a race. I'd love your thoughts, and also about Enea.
Yeah, Enea doesn't found really the confidence while we did take a decision to make a new setup for the race that is just a test for tomorrow. Maybe it works, maybe not, but we think that it was good to take this risk. Now, regarding the race, will be a kind of bad because almost everybody, the temperature raised a lot, and almost everybody put the hard tire on the front. So I think it will be difficult to see the same fast time that we saw this morning, and that they have to care about the front tire because it's more safe in a way on the brakes, but less edge grip. So we'll see. Obviously, it's always important to have a good start, and then we'll see what it's going to be.
Davide, who do you expect the pressure on Pecco to come from?
For sure, Jorge Martin doesn't have a good Friday, but I think that will be there, while I think that Vinales will be there, and as obvious, Marc Marquez will make an incredible start as usual, I guess, and then we'll be there too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks to Davide Tardozzi. Marc Marquez then 7th on the grid. Podiums in the last 3 sprints, podium in 5 of the opening 7 sprints, all of them second place, and he's come from lower than 7th, no question. 8th to 2nd in the sprint in Portimao, 13th to 2nd in that memorable charge in Le Mans, and then what a race it was, what a sprint it was for him in Catalonia, 14th to 2nd. So you feel that Marc Marquez should make light work really of that 3rd row start in 7th place. Maverick Vinales then fires away from the front row for Aprilia Racing, and the heroic Aleix Espargaro just a couple of places further back in 5th spot after his heavy crash going into the chicane yesterday. What are the prospects for the Aprilia duo? Well, let's hear from the boss, Paolo Bonora, who's beside him.
He is. It's always good to see Maverick on form like he is this weekend. Can you tell us what you think of his possibilities? Davide Tardozzi just said he thinks he'll be there, but also Aleix, after the battering in the crash yesterday, great effort this morning.
Yeah, for sure. Good qualifying laps for both our riders. Will be difficult, to be honest, Simon, because there are many riders that has good race pace, but we trust fully 100% on Maverick and Aleix, so we will see during this hard race.
Best of luck.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks as always to Paolo Bonora. Thanks very much, Simon. Maverick Vinales then 3 sprint podiums so far for him this season, including the back-to-back wins, of course, in Portimao and in Austin. His last sprint podium, a 3rd place from 3rd on the grid in Le Mans. Is that a bit of an omen then for the factory Aprilia rider? He's a 125cc winner here, a Moto3 winner and a MotoGP winner. He certainly does love Assen, does Vinales.
Yeah, he certainly seems the likeliest challenger to the Ducati-dominated front 2 rows of the grid. Of course, Aleix Espargaro is just behind in 5th as well, but Vinales has looked very quick all weekend. And now Bastianini has found the going a little bit tough, it has to be said here. Doesn't have a great record, certainly not in MotoGP here, although he did take a podium back in his Moto3 days. Never finished in the top 10 here. Of course, he was not exactly fully fit when he arrived here back in 2023. It was shortly after his return from injury, but Bastianini certainly going to have to get his elbows out earlier on for the middle of that 4th row.
At least that 11th place was his best qualifying ever in MotoGP. It sort of shows that he's never really quite gelled, has he, with this Assen circuit, certainly in the Premier class. Brad Binder then leads the Piera Mobility Group charge. Back of the 3rd row, 9th place goes the South African, of course, who thought he'd taken a double podium here in Assen last year, when he was penalised for track limits infringements in both bumps and relegated at a 3rd place in both the sprint and in the Grand Prix. A bit of a score to settle then around this Assen circuit for the KTM start.
Yeah, fortunately for him, the offending piece of tarmac that he ran onto in both the sprint and the race is no longer painted green, so he doesn't have to worry about going out there this time.
A new engine this weekend for Fabio Quartararo and a new era looming with Pramac Ducati moving over to Yamaha motorcycles in 2025. That's an exciting prospect. Factory bikes, factory contracted riders, a long list. Plenty of interested parties in those 2 Pramac Yamaha seats next season. Fabio Quartararo, Mugello, 2nd time in the last 3 that he didn't score a single point across the weekend. Finds himself, the Frenchman, overall in the championship, down in 13th place. A best sprint result so far this year of 5th in that dramatic sprint in Jerez. One of only 2 point-scoring finishes in the sprint format so far this season.
Yeah, of course, his sole sprint podium came right here 1 year ago, when, of course, he was the grateful recipient of that post-race penalty for Brad Binder.
So your front row here for this 13-lap Tissot sprint under glorious sunshine here in Assen. It's Maverick Vinales, 5th front row of the season for the Aprilia racing rider. Jorge Martin looking to increase his 18-point lead in the World Championship over Pecco Bagnaia, who has so far reigned supreme here in Assen. Can, for the first time, the World Champion make it back-to-back sprint wins here in Assen?